Okay, looks like we do have a quorum, so we can proceed with minutes. Everybody get a chance to review the minutes from last month's meeting? Any questions or comments on minutes? No? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve minutes. First and a second. All in favor of approving minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to bills. Staff, what do we have for bills this month?
Sure. The biggest bill we had this month was related to a facade improvement grant for 221 Sibley Street, so that was paid out in its full amount. We had some legal expenditures for some general matters. Good conference registration that Alex and I both attended for the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, and that rounds out the bills.
Excellent. Any questions on bills for John? Okay, I'll take a motion.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor of approving bills signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. On to business. John, looks like you're ready to fill us in.
Well, I'm ready to hand it off to someone who can fill you in better than I can. So, last month, we did have a discussion on the wastewater treatment plant relocation. As you know, wastewater treatment plant's relocating to a County Road 54 site in the next couple of years, and our engineering staff has been preparing for what happens on the site where it is existing, which is East 2nd Street, just east of the railroad tracks. We had some discussion at the meeting pertaining to a lift station that would be necessary for the plant's operation. So even though the plant would be moved to a new location, all the piping comes to its present location. We would need a lift station to get it over to the new location. And so I've got our Public Works Directors, Ryan Stemsky and Chad Davison from Metropolitan Council here to discuss their thinking and some of their investigation as it went forward. From what I recall from last month's meeting, there was some hesitation from HEDRA over whether a location of this wastewater treatment plant lift station on what we term Block 1 west of the site by ArtSpace would be a good decision and whether it would impact other development. So I shared that with both Ryan and Chad, and they've done some modifications. I thought it would be best for them to share directly what they have come up with. So turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
All right. Hi, my name is Chad Davison. I'm in the Interceptor Engineering Group for Metropolitan Council. We've been studying the relocation of the Hastings plant for about 3 years now. We went through a facility plan 2 years ago, and now we're implementing that with the final design. What you see on the map here is the orange box is the existing plant. And then the yellow dot is this proposed lift station that we're going to discuss here with you tonight. The whole system starts like over by the high school and comes down to the Vermilion River and circles around counterclockwise and comes up right past Kennedy Elementary. At that 10th Street crossing, we're able to intercept 90% of the flow and take it straight down to the plant by gravity. Everything north of that and basically the top of the 2nd Street hill all still has to come down to downtown because it just gets too low to get into that gravity pipe. So we got to place a lift station somewhere in the downtown area. I do want to note that Metropolitan Council's policy on infrastructure, that even if we build it, if it's solely one community's flow, then it becomes the community's infrastructure. We hand it over to them, they maintain it and own it. So we're going to own only the portion in the blue out at the plant. The rest of these pipes will still be city maintained and owned. So during our facility plan, we basically looked at a 1,000-foot radius around the existing plant. And we looked at all city-owned parcels and underutilized parcels, try to get an idea where we could possibly site this lift station. During that process, we had like 5 different criteria. Distance from the existing infrastructure that we got to pick up. You know, how much more do we have to redo the system and make it go backwards? You know, the farther we go up that hill to To the south, we got to reverse sewer lines around and go the other direction where they go down. Other things were what the neighboring uses were and whether it would, fit a lift station. We ultimately narrowed it down to sites 1 and 2, and on our existing plant, we looked at 2 different sites. Site 1A would require us to take existing emergency storage offline during construction while we're still actually treating at the plant before the new plant gets opened up. And our operations staff wasn't very keen on that. They flooded a number of homes in East Hastings before. And that's why that whole plan exists, is to protect those homes. 1B is up out of the floodplain, but it's kind of in an area that could potentially be used to redevelop. Once we decommission this property of the wastewater treatment plant, that land will revert back over to city ownership. It's in our title that we received the plant from Hastings. It says that it comes back to them. And then we have to negotiate how it gets turned over to you, what condition it's in. Then in the site number 2, that was the original site that I looked at when I was first doing our initial walkthrough and our write-up of our facility plan scope for our consultant. It seemed to make the most sense to me because of knowing where the trunks are for the city coming into the plant. They go right through that parking lot that's shown there. This is our draft of our decommissioning plan. This is just a concept. We haven't even really started discussing this with the city. Ultimately, there will be a cooperative agreement between the Met Council and the City of Hastings, and we'll discuss, what terms we want this property demolished to before we hand it over. North is to the left, so the river is on the left-hand side of this map. You can see 2nd Street and the tracks on the bottom, so you just got to rotate it. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan here, unless you want to maybe say anything else on this one. Here you go.
Thanks, Chad. And we can take your questions at the end here. I just have a few more slides. This is a very busy map. I apologize. But this is zoomed in on the lot north of Art Space. And I just wanted to kind of go through some of the encumbrances and what we were looking at when we tried to site the lift station on this this site location. You'll see in blue in the aqua color, that's the 100-year floodplain for the region. In the orange, that's the 500-year floodplain. So as we all know, in Hastings, this area does flood, and so we got to think about access points and what that does when installing a lift station. So we need to get it up gradient and out of those floodplain areas. I do want to call out, you'll see an emergency storage tank here. That's all subsurface. So that's all you'll see is grass or concrete or however we put that restoration together. You'll just see hatches there that we have access to. But it sort of speaks to the criticality of this lift station. The reason for that emergency storage tank is that we've designed the system such that our Public Works Department has a 60-minute response time. So that means a lightning strike, a mechanical failure that happens at the lift station. We have 60 minutes, which includes getting the alarm at any hour of the night, getting to the site, assessing the situation, going back to Public Works, picking up the necessary tools and equipment, and then addressing the problem. So that's an important feature that we needed to have with the amount of sewage that this lift station collects and in the location and proximity. If we don't do that, we back up in the sewage system into homes into East Hastings and the business district to the west. And ultimately, again, if we still don't get there, we have overflow onto the surface and into the river area. So wanted to point that out. We also, what you can see, you see in the picture here, here's the railroad tracks. from a public works perspective, with that emergency response time, we all know in a flood situation what happens on First Street. We know that the rail cars can get backed up onto Second Street. That's not a situation I want to put our department in emergency response. To have the lift station on this side of the train tracks is a public works preference. I'll just say that. That's pretty obvious. The other piece there is when trying to site this lift station, we were discussing with John and his team of keeping the lift station within the encumbrances. So this site already has encumbrances. You heard Chad mention, you can see the sanitary sewer line. We have a trunk main that serves the downtown area that cuts right through the property. That has a sewer easement over it for obvious reasons. That easement line comes out into this dotted line area. You can see my arrow. And then you can see the transmission lines here, the 3 lines that are labeled. That's the XL transmission line. So just looking at the easement area, the distance we want set back from our trunk sanitary sewer line, and the existence of those transmission lines, those were some encumbrances that we worked to keep the lift station site within. Here's just some photos. I just wanted to relate some of our other lift stations, sites in town. Other than the emergency tank that I pointed out, it's very similar to our other sites. You'll see, a generator, a wet well, and a control panel on these lift station sites. So that's very similar. It's encompassed in fencing for safety purposes. We don't want people getting hurt on our site, and we don't want our equipment getting damaged. That does happen, unfortunately, on our sites from time to time. This is our lift station site over on Glendale. Here's our lift station site over on Tuttle, kind of the same thing, a little zoomed out, but you can see that same wet well, generator, and control panel. Just to kind of come back and equate that to this site, you've got the wet well, the generator on the end there, the control panel. Here you'll see a valve vault, but again, that's buried, that's underground. So those are some of the key elements and similarities. This just gives you a perspective. You heard Chad talking about a little bit of what this lift station takes, but the area in red is what the lift station's sized to take. That's accommodating for existing flows and then also some of the redevelopment areas. So we worked with John and his team of what some of our sites could be in those locations and added all those up for the ultimate flow area. And this is where we're talking about the criticality of the flow that comes to this location and gets pumped via force main out to the gravity line that will exist on 10th Street. So it gives you some perspective there. All right, here's a site. Now, I am not a planner by any means, and I am not in the development world. That's what I have John and Alex for. But here was a rendering that the team put together just to call out a few things. I think this has a parking lot, and they're calling this a pickleball court. It could be anything. Man, that's just the popular thing, I think, in Hastings at the time, so somebody must have picked up on that. But there's a structure here, and there's a 3D rendering that I'll flip to next. But this just kind of gives an example of, with some of the encumbrances, it gets to be a somewhat tight of a space as it is, but there's things that can be done on this site, inevitably. By no means this is not a representation of anything true or factual, but it's just getting an idea of what could work with this space. You'll see here too, they'll be in the fenced-in area of the lift station site, and then here's that emergency storage area that is subsurface and can be restored accordingly. There would be, I think, just for where you see pickleball courts there, that's where the transmission lines would be running through as well.
So I think folks, the important part to show out on that map is that center strip. That area there is really no man's land as far as buildings go. You really can't do anything from a construction standpoint. You could use it for other things, but as far as building, commercial, other things, that would be out of bounds. So you're really looking at areas to the north. You can see where the tree line is there. You've got where that circle is, a little tiny bit of area in which you're on a little bit of a ridge. The rest of that slopes down into the river and is in the floodplain. So that northern lot right now is very encumbered for building purposes. When you look at the site where the pickleball court is right now, that has developability on it. That's free of encumbrances here. That was one of the things that we discussed with Ryan's group, was making sure that we had that area to the south free and clear. Now, this doesn't preclude our ability to use the area and the easement for things, but as far as buildings go, that wouldn't be something we could do.
Yeah, and here's a certain rendering, but definitely the green space could be parking as well. So just there's other visions that could be this site. Here's just a rendering of that same site coming off Tyler, and here's First. And this, again, pickleball courts, you know, they put a fence in here and a structure up here, but they're just representational. So one thing I wanted to point out, you'll see the fence around the Public Works lift station site. One thought was, and Met Council will work with us for whatever fencing material that would want to be or could be. We've shared with their architects the enclosure fencing of the Riverfront Renaissance. So that would be, makes sense to us as a starting place of, well, let's match that theming already. And so that fencing would definitely work around the lift station site. That's something we would probably take through committee and council too, to just get recommendations and confirmation on that. But I just wanted to point that out as well. Okay, and with that, Chad and I are both here to answer any questions you may have on the site and get your ultimate recommendations on how to move forward.
Anybody have questions? Go ahead, Jen.
The one thing I do appreciate is, in the past, when we've had developers come forward, the space that was on the north part of that lot was always parking. And it was just like another parking lot along the river. So I do like the fact that there's green there. So I think that is an improvement from a parking lot, in my perspective. So can we go back to that slide? The one, yeah, that's a good one. So I know it's just like what's possible on that lot, right? But so I like the idea, and I said this before, as long as we've got the pumping station on it, to have some sort of public use on that lot. And, you know, because I think we pretty much, if we go this direction, development, I don't think it's going to happen at all. I mean, it'd be nice to have the pickleball so people could see the river, but I understand, you know, getting in and out of Tyler might be an issue, but I support the concept, I guess.
Thanks, Peggy. Jen?
Thank you. I love this idea. I think as Commissioner Horsch mentioned, we've been kind of tossing around development on this Block 1 for a long time, and I think if we're going to be able to use it as a public works resource, as a parks resource, as a parking resource, that would be enormous. I appreciate the effort and the collaboration on making sure that the aesthetics match what we've already invested in downtown as a city, the Riverfront Renaissance particularly. My big question is, and I brought this up to my colleagues on HEDRA before, there's this crummy little shed on the dirt gravel lot. And I was kind of poking into the history of it. And turns out when we were helping to develop art space long ago, we actually moved it as a city. John knows. I don't know all that history. But could we move it again into the no man's land? I'm asking because the Downtown Business Association uses that shed, and we would like to keep using it. And if we're not going to use it, that's absolutely fine. we're just gonna need to find a different place to store things. So even if we could like, as a city, work with a partner and like help build a small storage area for some barricades, basically. So that's one thing that concerns some of the folks that I represent. But I love this concept. I think this is important. I love that it's public land used for public access, used for viewing the river. I like how you put that. Yeah. So, right. But I very much support this. So thank you.
Hi. I appreciate the clarity. I actually live right down at Art Space, and when we discussed this last month, I thought it was going to be huge, and I thought it was going to be an eyesore. So now, seeing this, I'm a little relieved. Since I live down there, I'm able to observe when we have events or if we have concerts, that space is utilized. So I was just kind of concerned about that, especially if we have, when we have our concerts, folks, they park their trailers in there as well. So, I mean, I don't think that's critical. I mean, this is more important when it comes to priority. So I would really like to have pickleball courts there, though, if we, because I play pickleball almost every day. So, and I live down in Art Space, but that doesn't matter. But, but no, again, I appreciate the presentation because I was concerned, just about it being an eyesore or it being disruptive to the businesses and also to the residents as well, so.
I'd just make one clarification too. I mean, the idea of the pickleball court is hypothetical, as well as the use over there. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it was more put in there as a representation of scale and what might develop in there. We may choose to develop something like that, may choose to see what other commercial options are, but just bear that in mind.
Well, it promotes health and wellness, so.
Straya said Ryan promised. No, just kidding. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, guys, I've got a couple of questions. One, is there going to be a new process line that'll have to be driven underneath the railroad, or does that exist already?
It exists already. You want to talk about where we're at in the design?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so during the construction of the lift station and while we're doing we still be treating at the wastewater treatment plant, but once we start commissioning the new plant, we'll need to get the flow from East Hastings over to the lift station, up to the top of the hill and down. And so that'll be a temporary pipe probably on the road underneath the bridge until we can get that plant completely decommissioned so that we can install a new connection from East Hastings across that lot in the floodplain. Okay. And then we'll go underneath the tracks, probably in the same alignment as or right next to the existing crossing. Because right now we have is it a 24 or a 36?
I think that we agreed on the 24.
Is it 24? Doesn't go to 36 until the other, well,
Right,
it doesn't matter.
right.
There's a fairly large conveyance pipe that goes underneath the railroad tracks right now, today. This one will be much smaller, probably more like a 10-inch, just to get the East Hastings to the other side of the tracks. And then it'll go to the south. So-
Okay. Next question.
And that's a jacking, so it's no.
Yep, pump, okay. The next question I have, with the standoff area at the 195 kV line, and you're talking about putting a generator underneath it, is anybody checked for stand-away locations for a separate generating activity underneath the high-tension line like that? Because there are some pretty strict guidelines for that.
Yep. We have brought in the XL transmission line folks.
Okay.
That we've been sharing our design with them as we go. We've gotten feedback from them. Latest is with meeting their setback requirements. We're fully in compliance now. We even have some space to shift around a little bit, but I believe, if you've read that last
Yeah.
memo too, I think we're fully in compliance as this sits now with the XL transmission folks.
Because, I mean, it's been a few years since I worked, but we had a standoff of like 75 feet, and this isn't 75 feet.
30.
It was.
Especially unless you have
It
a
was less
real,
than, plus those are pretty high lines too, so.
right, but,
Talking horizontal distance down.
you know, the horizontal distance, and depending on what size generator you're operating underneath it, makes a impact too. So as long as you've got all those
Yep.
reviewed and Excel has signed off on them,
They haven't signed off on it yet because we don't have the actual generator specifically
Okay.
designed yet. But they've given us a range of what we need to be somewhere near. And then once we pick an actual generator, it'll get run through the calcs on what the standoff is, and then we'll meet that.
okay?
Yeah. In addition to, we're working with them with constructability, avoidance of shock and things of those nature. So it's twofold, right? Long-term, and what are we putting where, making sure those are compliance. And then during construction, how do we make sure our contractors are safe and that we
Right.
have the proper notification? So absolutely on both fronts, and we'll continue to just, they've actually been a pretty good partner after we got them on board. It took a while, but now they're fully engaged, and we've got a share file with them.
Okay.
Going back and
Okay.
forth, so working that out.
Next question, security for the structure. We're going to have some, because the high importance of keeping this setup running once it's in place, we just can't have a padlock outside and say, I mean, this is being looked at, correct? I think we need to invest in some pretty substantial security efforts down there. I mean, in the last 2 days, we've got them sleeping on Second Street in the daytime. And it's like, okay, where are we at here, folks? But I would highly recommend some very secure setup for that facility when it gets built, or if it gets built in that location.
I think our initial renderings show, what, a 6-foot tall or 8-foot tall fence?
They were as high as 8, but I don't think we finalized that, so. But duly noted on the security. I hear you. I mean, we don't want to have to clean up the issue and pay for that and fund for that out of our budget, so.
I mean, you
we want to put
realize
the right
that,
amount of security
You
in
know,
place.
what Parks is struggling with the bathroom issue a block away. So I'm just kind of making sure that we got all the bases covered when it comes to that facility. Because if it's there, it's going to need some good high-tech security to keep that in place when it's needed.
Yeah, and what we found in our sites like this is adding syncing in camera coverage. We work well with PD on our grounds when there are incidences, and then they can follow up and make sure it doesn't happen again. If we didn't have that footage, not gonna happen. So to that point, there are different ways that we work with the police department to ensure those very things, so.
Keep that up to speed, because that's going to be a real critical factor, I think, as we move forward.
And we have Commissioner Carter that'll keep an eye on it for us too, right at our space there.
If you put in those pickleball courts, we have a deal.
See, I knew there was a trade-off there somewhere. Head of security.
It's not for free.
I don't know if anybody's tuning in, remotely to watch conversation or ask questions, but I think, the plan makes a ton of sense. It's really logical. The infrastructure's there. Gravity's very consistent, and that the low spot's the low spot. So, and it's a good use of that, limited use space. Just for folks that might not be familiar with lift stations, I mean, we all drive by them and walk by them on a daily basis, and usually don't notice them. Can you just kind of talk to what to expect? Sounds, would be sounds, odors, maintenance activity, just things that people might be wondering about out in the community?
Yeah, to those effects, it sounds very minimal. We haven't finalized the details of the generator, but, probably put in a natural gas generator is what we're
But
thinking.
that's
So
only used in emergency situations.
it's only used as power outages occur.
Once a month for testing, make sure it works.
So very minimal there. Other than that, sound's not a thing. Odor is being analyzed in the design. So all the potential for odor out of venting and whatnot, we're putting tools in place to prevent that, minimize that, and an odor control unit would be added if necessary. So I don't know when we're going to hear
We haven't
that
gotten
yet.
that recommendation letter yet.
No.
So we're currently in preliminary design, they're analyzing these things. We're taking data from existing lift stations in town that don't have odor and trying to determine whether or not we're going to be handing over a problem to the city. And that's not our intent. If it needs odor control, we're going to provide it. If it doesn't, they don't want to have to maintain this expensive system that they don't even need. So we're looking into it.
In our, we visit, we'll be there, every week. You'll see the public works vehicles inspecting things as needed, but we also would connect this to our SCADA system. So our computers at the mainframe back at Public Works let us know levels and alarms and detail of what's going on, security breaches. And so we are in constant contact with this, and so we understand those things, but we still do our due diligent checks and follow-up. So you will see our trucks coming in and out and doing different maintenance activities. Our jetter will come in there and clean things out on twice annually. We have some routine maintenance to keep our sewer insurances in check and things, and keep Met Council happy for what we're sending downstream. So we have a lot of those protocols in place, so.
Awesome, thank you. And I think that, kind of safe to say, for anybody that's wondering, the scale of any of those things is much, much smaller than what's in place directly across the tracks today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I gave some examples too, if folks ever wanted to drive by and see some of our existing lift stations. Tuttle's a good one to compare to and check it out, so.
Yeah, and this plan allows us to take that whole entire site across the tracks and use it for some sort of development or whatever. Whatever the city wants to do with it, it's yours,
Right.
so.
So I'm just going to do one last follow-up. So what's the time scale on, where we're going to plan this lot? Because I'm just thinking we've got that apartment building going in. It'd be nice to ask the residents of downtown, if we're going to go that direction. What do you, we've asked one, and I love pickleball, but it'd be nice to do a community survey of the people downtown who are going to be within walking distance of that space. What do you want to use it for? Where are we going with it?
So from a timing standpoint, we are looking to begin construction in 2026. So it's roughly April or May, this time of year in 2026. We'll probably open bids a good 7 or 8 months before that, so that we can have a lot of time to review submittals and stuff over the winter and be able to hit the ground running. So there is time to do something like that, yeah.
Got a couple last questions. I think it's going to be important when the decommissioning of the old plant comes into play. We're talking about full cleaning out and restoration. Is that kind of where the direction we're going? Or will there be like soil contamination that we got to get removed? Or folks will give it to us in a, what kind of condition, I guess is the question I'm posing.
We are currently, you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
We are currently in the process of doing a phase 1 environmental survey on the property. And out of that sampling, we will be drilling a couple piezometer holes and sampling the water and sampling the soil. Out of that report, we'll have recommendations for a phase 2 study. Phase 2 studies are really only valid for about a year and a half, so we want to wait until we're closer to construction to do that. We're probably actually in construction on the other portions Because the decommissioning portion is the last thing we're doing.
Right.
It's not until like 2028.
The other plant's up and running and you can just,
Right.
Okay.
So we don't want to do a phase 2 now and then have to do a whole nother phase 2 again later. So, but we'll have an idea of what we think is there and what we think needs to be done to get that property back to a sellable state. Or
that's
usable
what I'm wondering. It's like, okay, before the plant was there was Lund Ski Factory that was there. And they used a lot of varnishes and whatever else, and it was a wooden building and whatever. But I was just concerned about, okay, are we gonna get to a point like we are in one of our parks a little farther down the street where we had to have a bunch of contaminated soil removed to make it,
It's possible.
workable there. Just wondering. And the last question probably for me is the new plant discharge line. Are we committed to go down the 365 kV line?
I don't know what that is. What's
That's the high tension line
Oh,
standoff.
we're definitely not doing that.
You're not doing that? Because I was just looking at your display and that's going right down the 345 or 365 line.
There's a couple options we're looking at for our discharge. It's still in some public review and review with tribal and with
DNR?
environmental.
Okay.
So I can't really say too much about it right now.
Okay, just wondering if it's been honed in a little bit or not. That was my,
The one option of crossing the northern portion of our property, we were paralleling that transmission line.
yep,
But we were on the other side of the BP gas line that parallels
Right.
that same line.
Right.
So, that's still up in the air a little bit.
okay.
And just to confirm on the site condition with removal of foundations and those kinds
Yeah.
of contamination, just to assure the city that that's an agreement, as Chad noted, that we will review and put together and set with documentation and have legal review on both sides to make sure there's not it'd be nice if you could, that we will know exactly how that site's gonna be
Okay.
remediated and turned back, and we will pass on, that'll be a council
Right,
ultimate
'cause-
approval.
I mean, once that block comes back, I think there's just about everybody who sits at the Diaz here in different committees and council, think that that's a very valuable piece of property to the community in the downtown area. And we want to have it come back to the city in a very good condition.
Do we know who is going to own the property? Will it be HEDRA or will it be the city or will it be?
I think that's illegal,
I
whatever.
think that's yet to be determined on that one. Generally, if it's a redevelopment project that we're going to be selling to the private market, would come into HEDRA's ownership. If it's something more public and that would stay in a public capacity, be in the cities, but we determine that down the road.
So that might determine who we work with for that cooperative agreement to make sure that
True.
whoever's going to be
Well,
owning it.
yeah,
knows-
we'll sort through those details on it, but it's not uncommon for the city to work with someone on an agreement to the transfer property over to HEDRA, but we'll figure that out.
Okay.
And since Chad is here, I will say, Met Council has been a good partner and negotiating in good faith, so I think we know the entity we're working with, and there's an obligation to turn back, so we've had some good discussions, and I'm hopeful that that'll be a positive transition. I do want to ask, as a point of order, I'm hearing a lot of consensus, and maybe I'll look to you, John. I think for Met Council and for them to move forward in design, a lot of effort is going on, and then there will be continued effort to, plan the additional future phases. Just want to make sure that that's sort of the consensus of this committee and
Yeah, I think we're.
moving forward. Just how we do that, and maybe it's not a formal
Sure.
direction tonight, but if it could be, I just want to give the design team a little direction and finality to the situation.
Yeah, I think where Ryan's getting at here is there's going to need to be time and funds expended if they move forward on a specific plan here. Their preference is to go with the site here. I know there was some hesitation shared by HEDRA at last month's meeting. The conversation that I'm hearing tonight is those appear to have relaxed, but I certainly don't want to put words into the mouth of the commission here. If the commission feels comfortable in support of moving forward with the construction, with planning for construction on this property, that they may offer that as a motion tonight, or we can take that as a consensus from the group. So I really leave that into the comfort level of the commission's hand here. But I think the important part is if there's hesitations on development of this site as a lift station, we'd ask for you to come forward and state those now so that we can make corrections. Thank you.
Anybody have any open concerns that would make them reluctant for this to move forward?
I think that, I believe the consensus is that we are very supportive of this, and I would make a motion to endorse the Met Council usage for the lift station, Tyler and First Street.
I second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor of endorsing the plan as approved, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can take care of that for you. Thanks. Thanks, John. Switch it around. You're looking at me like I should say something. I'll say something, I guess. We'll move on to the next section of our meeting if that's okay here. That is our strategic plan. As you are well aware of, the last couple of meetings, HEDRA has met to discuss where we should be doing over the next couple of years. We had a similar exercise a year or two ago in which we developed a strategic plan divided into different categories, generally looking at development of underutilized sites, support of existing affordable housing stock, character and tourism, improvements to development process, business retention and expansion. We spent a lot of time talking about the first page, which were the strategic actions, which is really the nuts and bolts of what we do as an authority, and that is looking at land for redevelopment and the potential for that. We spent a lot of time looking at sites. One of the charges that I asked of the commission was to be effective, we need to be strategic and to really start prioritizing some of those sites. So at the last meeting we did that. I hope that this reflects the discussion that we had. The one thing that was resounding out of the meeting when we talked about strategic actions was what we termed Block 28, which is that block on the west side of Vermilion Street between 4th and 5th, the old Wells Fargo building where Spiral Pizza is, Dick's Barber Shop, so forth. We've taken action on that block. We want to continue to take action on that block. So I have that as our highest priority. Going down this list, it's not, I haven't necessarily ranked them, but in the discussion we had at the last meeting, the higher it is up on this list, it seemed like the more time was spent on it. One of the things we didn't have on there during the last time period was Westview Mall, so supporting the owner and marketing and lease opportunities, and also facilitating development of additional commercial space within the parking lot area. So establishing some priorities with that. Block 15, which is the block between 3rd and 4th Street, Ramsey and Sibley, where we have the Tyler Street Landing project that Luke Seward came forward with, as well as the 213, 215 Ramsey Street building, in which we have ownership of half of the building and partial ownership of the rest of the property here. So collectively looking at that as a half block of development. The block along 2nd Street, where the post office is, I haven't heard anything that would be different than what it is today, but that south half of the block may have some development opportunity on this. One of the things I will point out on here is we have an action relating to Tyler Street Landing coming up in August of this year, and that is the extension of the purchase and development agreement by HEDRA, as well as the land use approvals that the council gave. My recommendation at this point, what's part of under this plan, is to let that expire. I have not heard anything from Mr. Seward at this point that would lead me to the contrary, that that project would be feasible. I do remain open that if something came forward and it was, I could be swayed differently. But the conversations I've had, which were of about a month ago now, I don't see that changing. It doesn't preclude Mr. Seward from coming back in the future and coming back with a proposal. I think the proposal he had was great from a visual standpoint and an impact statement of the downtown. When you get to development of that, it seems like that was a difficult one to finance. So I do have that in there, so I just wanted to point that out too. But really looking at Block 15 as a half block of a development opportunity in the future. Highway 61 and 46 at the corner there where the Quick Trip site, Quick Trip land is, and Murph's Automotive, mentioned at the last meeting that Murph's was for sale, looking for joint development of that site. Block 1 redevelopment we talked about tonight, and then the wastewater treatment plant. So really, when I look at these, I'm looking at these as a schedule of priorities as far as opportunities, what we have invested in the site, and when the sites might be ripe for development. When we look at Block 28, we're involved in it. Westview Mall looks like the opportunities will change there with the sale and development of the land under the purchase agreement across the street. Block 15 has some value in it as well. So really looking at those, but not keeping our eye out the ball on some of these further ones. One other thing I will point out pertaining to these underutilized sites is many of them are within the downtown area. And many of them would be aided by a development of what I would call a Heart of Hastings 2.0. Our Heart of Hastings plan was a downtown plan that we put together 20 years ago, which really kickstarted a lot of the stuff we saw down there. And to be able to look at what we term in the business a small area plan, which would focus specifically on the economic value and potential land use and design within that area. So I think that's one of the things I'm looking at for potential budget ask as we get into 25 here. Also have on there the parking lot for Red Rock, Hastings Creamery, and then some downtown parking. So we've spent a lot of time on that portion of it. So I wanted to pause, make sure that I characterized that information correctly. If there's any priority that should be different or changes to it, open that up for discussion amongst the commission.
John, do we have an insight yet from DOT of when they actually are going to, get out of two-lane traffic on 61? Are we doing southbound first, northbound? We probably don't have any idea.
You're talking about the 61 reconstruction project? Yeah,
Right.
don't know that yet.
Because the question I posed, and like we talked last meeting, was, we want to have the Block 28 situation squared away, so we don't want to come out of, at least that's my interpretation, we don't want to come out of the highway rebuild and have this, whatever you want to call it, sit there. It's like,
I would agree. We would like to be in the position in which we could time the construction of that project with the road work going on 61 so they could both open concurrently. Absolutely.
that to me strikes me as one of the top priorities of working that through so that we're set, and as the process moves forward, we've got our side covered.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think you got it exactly right, John. The only comment I would have is that I always look at opportunities to figure out where we can do affordable housing, where we can do that component, and, just so staff, when we look at redeveloping certain, or working with an owner, just always keeping, because I just see that it's going to be a continuing need. And if we've got spaces that really fit a good, it's a good opportunity to put that in that space. I don't want us just to preclude looking at that as we go forward.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Peggy as well. I feel like, if we want to see Hastings grow and we want to see, just different demographic, I think when folks hear affordable housing, they have these myths, but, affordable housing, there's middle-class, working-class folks now, living in affordable housing because housing is so expensive right now. So with that being said, I support that as well.
Thank you both. Anybody else have any commentary on John's summary of our strategic plan?
Yeah, and I guess I'll just move on a couple of things afterwards, because the other spaces of the comprehensive plan, or strategic plan, excuse me. One of the things tipping off on affordable housing stock, one of the tools that we have upcoming here that we did not have a year ago is the sales tax revenue that we will be granted by the state legislature here under the Local Affordable Housing Act. And so we've got revenue coming in of a couple $100,000 a year that can be used for certain activities. We're going to be meeting jointly with the City Council and with the Dakota County Community Development Agency in July to review how this might work. The CDA provides a lot of housing programs right now. It might be something for us to consider for them to earmark certain funds that we have specifically towards Hastings to run those programs, because they're good at doing this. HEDRA and the City Council may have other ideas on where the funds might be allocated. So that's one discussion that we'll be having here, and something that wasn't available a few years ago. So that's one change under the housing stock. The rest of these, I think, are pretty similar to what we had before. And as I look through the rest of them, a lot of these are unchanged as well. We will continue to work with the tourism aspect of it, improvements to development process, and then Alex getting out and with his business drop-ins, and we're going to be scheduling some formal BRNE visits. He's working on that as we speak. So just didn't want to let those go to the wayside, because we didn't spend a lot of time on those. Majority were spent on the first portion. So if there's any questions or discussions on the remaining portion. Okay, yeah, and if this is something that HEDRA is agreeable to, I'd ask for your support tonight in adopting the strategic plan as it sits today.
Your Honor, I'd love to make a motion to adopt the strategic plan as printed here.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the strategic plan as proposed, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries.
Well,
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you for all your work in putting this together here. This is a group effort, and we hope to put it to good use. Thank you.
Looks like Alex is up. All right.
Alrighty, Commissioners, thank you. So, as we've discussed before, the HEDRA has a purchase agreement with Rio Grande Express to sell a parcel of land in the industrial park for them to construct a building for their trucking company. As a requirement of the purchase agreement, the buyer is required to have received site plan approvals before closing on the property. Upon initial evaluation of their submitted site plan materials, it was found that the geotechnical information wasn't sufficient for the approvals. So getting that proper information is going to delay that site plan approval process. So what we're looking to do is extend the purchase agreement with Rio Grande Express through the end of the year, so that we don't have to come back into a second extension. So just looking for a motion to approve Resolution 2024-07, approving the First Amendment to the purchase agreement between Rio Grande Express and HEDRA. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions regarding that one?
Nope, I'll move Resolution 2024-07.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving Resolution 2024-07, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
And I'm back. As you all know, the HEDRA owns the house at 114 5th Street West on Block 28. And another business on Block 28 is Spiral Pizza, and the owner of that business and the adjacent property approached staff to inquire about the possibility of placing a storage container on their property to store equipment. Upon further discussion, led to staff proposing that the city leases the garage space at 114 5th Street West to the owner of Spiral Pizza, Hastings Holding Company LLC. And in lieu of cash payments, Hastings Holding Company LLC will perform yard maintenance services for 114 5th Street West. And this lease would be effective until the end of May 2026. Any questions?
Question, Alex, in the parking lot adjacent to the west, I parked in there the other day and went into the fire hall, but some of those trees are really hanging over the fence to the west. Could we clean some of that up so that, you know, at least when you're parking in the parking lot and going over to the fire hall, you know, some of those branches aren't scraping on the back of your vehicle?
Yeah.
Please?
Yes, we will get those cleaned up.
Thank you.
I have one question too, Alex. So if they've got to insure it, are they insuring the structure too, so we can save a couple bucks on insurance? Do you know?
I am unsure, and I can look into that.
Yeah, they're carrying liability insurance for the structure itself as far as anything that they would place inside. I think it's $1 million that they have within there. So they have that end of it that they would take over liability for. We would still take over tax. Well, it isn't tax payments on that. I take that back because it's exempt now. Never mind.
One other question regarding the lawn maintenance, does that include winter things like snow removal of the sidewalk at least?
Yeah, with snow removal, we have our Parks Department providing that in kind over the winter, so we haven't had to pay out for that. Where we had a contract with Precision to do lawn maintenance, so we would end that contract with Precision and have this in lieu.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. If we will be cleaning up the HEDRA-owned parking lot as well, do we need to add that to the agreement? If they'll be doing tree maintenance?
Yeah, I haven't discussed tree maintenance specifically with them. I'd like to see what we might be able to do on our own for that.
Oh, okay,
'Cause
just
I
checking.
think we discussed lawn maintenance with the owner of Spiral, but with that one, understand the concerns that have been shared out
Okay,
there. I think this
thank you.
is something we'll figure out.
I think Parks or somebody, you know, could come over our streets with their lift and be able to cut some of those off a little bit so that they're not so.
Yeah.
My other question is, in Article 16, the default and remedies, I'm just curious, it says, if they're in default for a period of 30 days, a written notice goes to the landlord. I have neighbors who have been in trouble with their other neighbors in code enforcement because they haven't mowed their lawn for shorter than that, and then your lawn gets really long. So can you just discuss with us a little bit about the consequences of if they do not take care of the lawn maintenance? How are we actually going to evict them from the space for the storage unit? And is it code enforcement or is it, I don't know. Could you explain that a little bit more to us?
That's an interesting question coming up here. Yeah, if the lawn maintenance is not performed as per the contract, they'd be in breach of the contract there. They'd be liable to move the items out and potentially sever. Now, I would not want to get to that point
Right.
with them. Hopefully work on that one. Worst case scenario I see ourselves in is if they were not providing lawn maintenance, we would have to reestablish paying out of pocket for that and get them out of the facility.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to be clear about our expectations for the maintenance. I would make a motion to authorize the lease of space.
Okay, all in favor of authorizing the lease of space as proposed, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay.
Me again. I believe I want to make sure I'm on the right thing. We are on to business continued, Makers Market update, correct? Perfect. All right, so the Hastings Makers Market is coming back for its third season, and like the past two seasons, there's going to be little tweaks to it. So one of the biggest things is that we are increasing the number of events from 4 to 6 of them, occurring on the second and fourth Thursdays of June, July, and August. This was just to provide more options for people to attend and to provide a more standardized number of dates to communicate that out. Additionally, a change for this year's market is the introduction of a one-time, non-refundable registration fee of $50. This allows vendors to attend all 6 events, and in the past, if vendors said that they registered for an event and then didn't show up, they were not allowed to come back. This eliminates that option as to create a more friendly environment for makers. The registration is open on the City of Hastings website. There's been some flyers communicated out to the Chamber, the Downtown Business Association, the Hastings Farmers Market Group to recruit vendors, and we have 12 vendors recruited so far, with 10 signed up for the first event on June 11th. Yes. And yeah, any questions or anything about Makers Market?
I have one question. Has the concert, are we getting duffing funds again? Because this was I went down, this was a huge thing last year. I thought it was really well attended. And I know we got some acts, I think because of duffing funds maybe. Are we getting that level of, has it been released yet or anything?
Yeah. As far as doffing funds and the concert series itself, I'm unsure. We work closely with Paige in the Parks Department, who organizes all the concerts themselves. We wanted to be able to piggyback off of that with the Makers Market, making sure that the operations that we have for Makers Market are at the same time. As far as the funding that we have, we really haven't had a budget before. There's not much expenses that we have other than staff. You know, we have a few incidentals that we purchase, but it hasn't been a terribly expensive thing.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, the first one is June 13th.
Thank you very much. I keep getting dates confused.
Me too.
Okay, any other questions on Makers Market? Okay.
All right. Another event that is going to be happening on May 23rd, the second annual Southeast Metro Development Summit will be held at the Mendakota Country Club, put on jointly by Dakota and Washington counties. This event is to provide real estate professionals with an in-depth view into the development climate of the Southeast Metro area. This is something that was put on last year, was very highly attended, and real estate professionals found a lot of benefit. So we'll be doing that again. So John and I will both be attending that in May.
Yeah, and I will note, as Alex is shy about noting it, he has served on the development committee for that. I've helped out as well. And so we will have some Hastings speakers related to that on the confluence, and I think not Enclave Development, that's right. We had some development contacts for apartments. The big point of that is sometimes this area of the metropolitan area does not get the attention that other more fashionable areas receive, I would say. And we want to make sure that people who are more focused, more west of here, realize the development opportunities that are here. So that's kind of the big focus of this.
Great, thank you.
We have our open to business first quarter report here that Natalie's put together. Activities that Natalie has gone about within the first quarter are as we would expect Natalie to do. She does an excellent job in running that program. Specifically by the numbers, we had 7 Hastings businesses and 3 residents that received assistance during this time period. So if there's any questions, I can answer those at those time, but it was more of an informational item for the commission tonight.
Thank you. I know I say it every time. I could not be more thrilled with Open to Business. I brag about it to my business friends outside of Dakota County, and they all search for a program like we have. So we're just so lucky, and Natalie's incredible. So thank you for this information.
Thank you. Last thing I have is development updates on here. With Mint Development, that's the national retailer site at Pleasant and South Frontage Road. We do have an application in to change the comprehensive plan land use and rezoning that's moving forward, going to Planning Commission next Monday, and then to the council at the beginning of June. So that's consistent with what their plan was under the purchase agreement. It's the first half of the entitlements. We're coming forward now with something that's absent of the actual development plan, but that will be coming as a separate item per our purchase agreement that needs to be completed by the end of the year so we can close by the end of the year. And talking to Mr. Bars, it looks like that's on track to go, and so looking forward to that coming forward. With South Oaks 4th Edition, grading and utility work has commenced there. That's for 35 homes down on Century north of 31st Street, or south of 31st. This has been a long time project that we've wanted to finally conclude, so we're happy to see the dirt dug on that one. Lake Isabel Flats is open. Commissioner Pemble shared some of his experiences earlier today. It sounds like the lease rates that he's heard have gone well. What I heard with the temporary CO being issued is that there were 10 families ready to move in out of the 90 units that were there. So that's great to see that moving along. One of the things that we had approved last night at City Council was our zoning code update, which doesn't directly affect activities of HEDRA, but really has an effect on land use development within the city. We haven't updated our zoning code in about 30 years. We want it to be able to reflect trends in development and to be able to assist in the economic development growth of the city. So we're going to be going through that over the next year. There'll be outreach that we'll have with users, businesses, developers, as well as the general public relating to that. Also relating to updates, Alex has put together a great RFP for a small area plan for Highway 55. And I'll clarify this here. I mean, the plan itself is to take a look at potential land use and economic development in areas at the west side of town. These are areas that are within the city limits, areas that are outside the city limits. So it's looking at this proactively to see what could be built there. What this is not is a plan by the city to go out and actively develop these areas. We literally leave this to the market, but the market comes back to us and asks, hey, what are you looking at? What's your vision? And this is to provide that vision. But being an economic development group, we also wanted to make sure that it had some economic reality related to it, that it's not just a bunch of pretty drawings on things we'd like to see, but something that could work and what the economic impact of that would be. So that's what I've got for updates. Yeah.
So is that the existing Highway 55? Are we looking for the future, the expansion of, beyond the city limits? Or are we talking about 55 from stadium to clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So the proposed 400 acres of that plan goes from roughly General Sieben to Jacob Avenue, and then in that new development area, and then from 150th to 140th. That's that general swath of area. So a good chunk of it is outside of current city limits, but as John said, we received communication from existing property owners asking for guidance from the city on what development might, favorable development might look like going forward there, and that's what spurred us looking at this. Not that the city has current plans to develop that area.
Future development outside of what we have right now. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Is there any thought of a future industrial park out in that area someplace? by Jacob and maybe, you know,
Yeah, we did have.
46.
We have land designated in our comprehensive plan a little bit south of this development area along the 46 corridor.
okay,
So that remains.
okay, good.
Okay, lots of good questions. Anything else? Okay. Okay. If no one else has anything to bring up, I guess I'll take a motion to close the meeting. All right. All in favor of closing tonight's evening signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.
Peggy, I apologize for